This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey, it's Meredith. Welcome back to the show. On today's episode, we are going back to our roots a little bit. We're going to talk about some science. I'm calling it a research roundup. And the way I thought I would format this one was picking 3 articles, reviews, journal submissions. One on the topic of nutrition. So we're going to talk about fasting and autophagy. One on the topic of strength training. We're going to talk about working to failure or leaving some reps in reserve. And then one topic that changed our mind on a little something. And I won't spoil this one, but the title of the article is The Sweet Tooth Trial. So I hope you enjoy this format. If you've been itching to hear about some emerging research, I think you're going to like this one. I would like to start this episode of the show by asking a question. What is one thing that you've learned about anything in the last week?
I have learned that you can apparently you can go to a dental specialist for cats to get their teeth shaved down if they don't fit in their mouths properly.
Well, how did this come up?
Well, I thought Ren had a cold that has been plaguing her since we got her.
Ren is the kitten.
Yeah, so we bring her into the vet, and the vet finds this other problem with her, that when her teeth are together, her mouth is shut, one of her top back teeth digs into the bottom gum. So, because the vet knows that we will do anything for our animals, and she said as much, she said their options are to pull the tooth. Well, they were going to get more information, but the options were to pull the tooth or to go to a dental specialist to get the tooth shaved down. I don't even want to know how much that costs.
A dental? Like that kind of dental work?
Yeah.
I don't know. A lot. Well, then they kind of decided it could be that, but it also could be maybe just her like head isn't done growing, and so they were gonna leave it for now. Because I don't think there's any real risk to it at this particular juncture.
Yeah, as long as the pain is managed.
I mean, she's doing great with her meds. She's on antibiotics and pain meds, which I was like, how do you give a tablet to a cat? But it's actually kind of easy because cats, once they have something in their mouth, because of the direction of the their little tongue barbs, they really struggle to spit things out. So it's kind of easy.
Yeah.
You just get it, you put it on some cat yogurt and you squeeze it, and then she has it. She's like, ew, I don't want it, but she can't do anything about it.
Right.
So she just takes the pill. What does Rin prefer? Do you know? She like down for dental or just pull it? What did she meow?
She said whatever takes the least amount of her. She meowed.
Thank you.
She meowed.
Yes.
That she prefers the procedure that takes the least amount of recovery time.
Okay. I don't know which one that is.
We don't know yet. I said to her, I meowed back.
You meowed.
Yeah, I meowed back that we aren't sure which one that will be, that we need to gather some more information and let her grow to be a little bit bigger.
Okay. Because it might just go away.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you didn't tell her about her upcoming other surgery, right?
No.
Okay, good.
She meowed to me that she feels left out because she's the only one who hasn't had surgery.
Yep. And the other animals make fun of her.
Have you had surgery?
Me?
Yeah.
When I was little. My sinus my sinuses, which like would like a refund because that doesn't seem to be have done anything.
No, I feel like they made whatever it was worse.
Maybe it would have been so much worse.
Maybe.
You don't even know. Well, ask me.
Okay, what is something that you have learned in the last week?
I've learned how to make sourdough cinnamon rolls. Which it's one of, okay. First of all, to have cinnamon rolls that are this delicious just like in your refrigerator feels like the like penultimate indulgence. I want to like freeze them or give them away so that there are fewer of them. But we do a good job. I'm not just like housing cinnamon rolls. And they're great for like after bike rides or after you've been outside because you can warm them up. They're really nice. Okay. But cinnamon rolls are really like any advanced sourdough recipe. I just assume will be so difficult that I just don't bother with it. Like I pretty much do bread and pizza dough. And pizza dough is really just bread with like not as many stretch and folds and no proofing. So they're like the same recipe-ish. Cinnamon rolls, I was like, nah, it's going to be that's like actual baking, and I don't bake. But it's actually super easy. And so it has led me to consider doing things like croissants. Wait, how do French people say croissant?
Pretty good.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, croissants or like a sandwich bread.
See, a sandwich bread makes more sense for us.
Yeah.
Because I've tried to make sandwiches with regular sourdough loaves and the crust is too hard.
Yeah. It's like if
you
I
can't do a sandwich with that crust.
Some people do, and you get like rustic sandwiches at like lunch. We used to have these lunches at work. Not where I work now, where I used to work.
Right.
But they would have out sandwich trays of all these different kinds.
I don't know what a rustic sandwich is, but I'm pretty sure tuna salad on white bread doesn't count as one.
They would put out these trays of all these different kinds of sandwiches and wraps and things for these lunch and learns or lunch meetings or whatever. And there would often be this one that, I mean, it looks like a lovely sandwich. It's like turkey, arugula, maybe like some pear and some freaky kind of cheese. Like it's a nice artisan sandwich.
Sounds like it would go well with brie.
Yeah, freaky cheese on sandwich. So, but it would be on this like rustic cut, very like bubbly looking sort of sourdough. And you're like, oh, it's going to be awesome. And then you go to take a bite and it murders your mouth.
Yeah,
it's
the crust.
Yeah, so.
You can only eat sourdough crust by itself.
Yeah.
It has to be entering the mouth as it's like the only thing.
Yeah.
Basically kind of like pointed at you.
Yeah.
It can't be sideways like you would eat it with a sandwich. It has to be pointed at you. It has to have butter and jam. You have to have separately buttered and jammed the crust piece.
Because if you...
On the flat part, like on the inner part.
Yep. Yeah, because if you take a bite of a sandwich, so like the middle of the sandwich is one texture.
Yeah,
it's like
that's
sandwich
fine.
Texture. Great. But then the side of the sandwich is like a whole different thing.
I know.
It's like taking a bite of, you know, the things that they shove in the side of your mouth when you get dental x-rays? It's like that. It's like a sandwich
eating
with
a chip
that.
vertically.
Yeah. 100%.
Which I've accidentally done and it really hurts.
Yeah, it's like your soft palate.
Yeah.
It's like good luck.
It
healing
feels like a
that.
shard of glass in your mouth.
Yep. Your mouth's bleeding. Enjoy that.
I always am weary of the bottom of the chip bag.
Yeah.
Where you just house like so many chips at once.
You're not pulling them out at once. You're going in with 4, maybe 5 of your pincers and just like you're a claw machine.
Yeah.
Trying to get like a stuffed elephant, but you just like, let me see what crummies I come up with. So you come up with like crummy-sized crummies, but inevitably there's like an oversized crummy in there. And then you pop them in your mouth, and the oversized crummy is the one that flips.
Yeah, you
Little
can't
bastard.
eat chips like popcorn.
Nope.
It's got to be one at a time.
Yeah. Yeah.
To avoid that
So,
risk.
yeah. Sandwich bread. Coming right up.
I'm down for it.
And a croissant. I guess moral of the story, there are often things that are harder in your mind than they are in reality. It is always impossible until it is done. What other like cliche thing can I say? That's kind of it. Anyways, life lesson. Today's episode, I thought it would be neato to do a little research roundup on some topics, some recent research, breaking research, new things. What do you think?
I'm down for it.
Yeah, so I pulled three research studies, articles. The first one we'll do like nutrition and food. Like maybe this will become a series. We'll see. A nutrition and food one. And then we'll do like a training, like a strength training one for today. And then I pulled one that made me change my mind on something, which happens. It does happen, as it should, when presented with new and improved information. Anyone who's like scientifically minded, that's the hallmark. If someone says that they're evidence-based or that they like science, but you're like, well, what do you think about, this study? And they're like, oh, no. Or they just really hold on to what they want to believe. That's not someone who's into science. That's someone who's made a religion out of whatever it is that they're trying to believe.
Well, what if someone's really into science and then they look at the study and there's a lot of nuance?
Yeah.
Which there is, especially with, the most research I'm familiar with, or the research I'm most familiar with is nutrition. And within that, there is a lot of nuance.
Yeah.
And so if someone says they're evidence-based and they don't like a study, if they don't like it for specific reasons and not because they want to hold their pre-existing beliefs close to their heart and not change their mind.
Right. I guess the way that would feel, someone may not even be willing to look at counter science or information, data that might contradict the beliefs that they hold. Like there are plenty of studies that just aren't good. Either they're not set up properly, they have huge limitations, they aren't controlled. There's conflicts of interest. Like I was really bummed out recently. This is not one that we will talk about today, but there was a study that was published on the impact of creatine supplementation on strength gains in menopausal women. I'm like, ooh, right up my alley. This is perfect. I'm a huge cheerleader for creatine. And anytime that I see research pertaining to menopausal women, especially when it comes to strength training, I'm like, this is going to be great. And so I read it, and at first it reads in this kind of compelling way. And then you start like sort of looking at the way that it was structured, and you're like, I don't know, this isn't really set up well enough for them to be making the claims that they're making. And then it ended up being funded by this creatine supplement company. So really they were just trying to push some supportive science through. And it's so unfortunate because this is the really damaging thing about bad science is that there is definitely a positive correlation between creatine supplementation and what the measure of interest that they were looking at. But they set the study up so poorly that it calls into question the entire hypothesis or the purpose of doing the study. And once people see that, like if someone's considering creatine and then someone's like, they point that out, they might think, oh, it's just a supplement company trying to pull one over on me to get them to buy or to get me to buy their product. And that opinion is taken forward and applied like universally to all research pertaining to creatine, or, it just becomes the way that they see the supplement industry and a supplement like creatine, which has so much good research behind it.
It undermines all of the other research that may support it.
Yeah. And that's,
it's kind of like, do you remember when I think it was the Today Show put up this study that confirmed that HRT caused cancer?
Oh, I mean, the Today Show wasn't the only one.
Well, it was, yeah, but the Today Show back then was huge. I mean, it might still be huge. I don't watch it, so that's my bias. But they're still crawling back from that.
Well, I mean, that was the whole fallout from the Women's Health Initiative in the late 90s, early 2000s. And it was because there was some early data that came out of some of those studies that did show an increased risk in potentially like the development of certain types of cancers. But it was so early, and it just wasn't that research and that data was not presented in a way that is consistent with how research like that is typically presented. And it wasn't just women who who became afraid of hormone therapy. It was doctors too. Like the impact was that doctors stopped prescribing it generally. Women stopped seeking it out because they just thought it's going to cause cancer. And even though there were so many positive benefits that were demonstrated during that same study, different combinations of hormones, different this, like there's a whole generation of women that just didn't explore it, where they took hormone therapy for a little while and were like, oh, it's not for me. It made me feel this or this. I had a side effect. And so I stopped. But like that reluctance comes from that. And that wasn't even bad research. It was just misinterpreted. It wasn't complete at that time. And it's taken like 20 years to get out from under that. And we're still not out from under that.
Yeah. So before we dive into the research, the studies that you pulled out, it almost would be beneficial and helpful to help lay out a few things to look at when to know, that will help you decide when to know you can take a study at, I guess, face value, or when you know it's valid.
Yeah.
What's good science?
Well, I guess there's kind of, you can work backwards with a lot of research that's out there. It helps to understand sort of the hierarchy of like research, the way that research is done. And so at the very foundational level, like someone might just ask a question. Does this cause this? Is there any correlation? That's how research starts. Science is really just it's not meant to prove or disprove anything. It's just asking questions. And that's why there are so many studies that seemingly contradict one another. But you can't, like, we can understand context. We can see the landscape in which things exist. But with research, it can only see, it's got a much more narrow lens. And that's by design. And that's the way that it should be, because you can't typically capture all of the possible combinations and nuance and criteria in one single study. Because when you try to do that, you introduce so many variables that it becomes difficult to assess where the impact might be coming from.
So, for example, does alcohol cause weight gain?
Right.
Well, it could be that alcohol, you can't tease out just those two factors.
You can, but
it has to be such a narrow study, and it has to be so well designed.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't, I guess you can make a correlation.
Well, in the context of humans, like if you were to set that study up, you could certainly use a rodent model, and there's genetically engineered mice that simulate like human metabolic systems. So you could look at that and be really focused with it. But as soon as you get into humans, now you're looking at, alcohol intake, but also there are all these other factors that contribute to someone's health status or body weight or whatever it is that you're looking at. And so how do you control that? You can't just lock people in a lab for 10 years and observe them under very specific living criteria. That's not ethical. So it gets really complicated. So when you're trying to answer a question like that, I think it's it's enticing to ask a question like that. I think it's more beneficial to focus on the outcome that you're after. That's a bit easier. But when you're asking a specific, even the alcohol thing. So if no one had developed a hypothesis on that, you could ask that question, and you could set the study up maybe with mice where you give control, like one group consumes some amount of alcohol, the other one consumes a calorie balanced diet, like same intake, and then you have a control group in there somewhere, and you observe. And then you have a hypothesis, you have a null hypothesis, and you have outcomes that can be measured. And so that's like very foundationally how one single study is set up. Does X cause Y? Is there a correlation? And so you ask enough questions and you start to develop a body of research around a single topic. And these studies can be done by various people in various organizations, universities, in corporate. Once you have enough studies that are asking similar questions, not always the exact same questions, you can start to derive, you can start to understand what the trends are, and you can do at that point some, systematic reviews, meta-analyses, where you're able to observe across many studies what the average of the data is. Like, are we seeing population level trends? And so that's how you kind of aggregate data in a way that's useful. And then obviously, like on a clinical level, the like randomized controlled clinical trials is how you assess things like pharmaceutical efficacy, where you can actually be really specific. And that's where you see these really bomb-proof study designs where they're doing like randomized crossover, double-blinded. You're assessing essentially every combination of intervention with every combination of person who's in the study, so that you can say with like relative certainty that the intervention that you're testing is or is not having the hypothesized effect. And so that's how like pharmaceutical research is set up. But obviously, like, you can't do that kind of research with every single question because it's extravagantly expensive. And it is still hard to control. Like, it's when you're dealing with people, it's very, very hard. So one thing that you can do when you're looking at studies, specifically studies, but also like meta-analyses, sometimes like randomized control trials, depending on what they're looking at. If you go towards the conclusion or where the author is speaking to the results, if it says something like additional research is required before drawing conclusions or to fully understand X, like what that means is the author is acknowledging that they're contributing data to a broad body of understanding and of data, but that you should not be drawing conclusions based on that one study. They're aware that it is not robust enough to be drawing conclusions from. And that, I bet you 90% of the research that's out there has that disclaimer in it. Does that stop people from drawing conclusions? Not really.
Yeah, I think the biggest culprit for drawing conclusions to support anything are documentaries. Like The Game Changers was a really bad one. You did a whole write-up on that.
Yeah.
That was really, I mean, it wasn't eye-opening for me because you know, if you have any sort of science background, it's so easy to tell. But there are a lot of people in the world that don't. And once you take a closer look at how they're drawing conclusions and what conclusions they're drawing, you can see very clearly that it's not what the study is saying or what the study is looking at or even what the study is concluding.
Sometimes the study actually is supporting the opposite takeaway.
Yeah, and if they just post the site, like, you know how they do it in documentaries where they flash the citations up there, it feels convincing.
You're like, oh my gosh, look at all this research.
But when you stop, you pause, and what you did was look up each study.
Yeah.
You realize that it's just BS.
They're just making things up.
And a really great way to figure out if this research is something that you can trust, I guess, for lack of a better word, you can look at who is funding it.
Often, yeah.
And if there's a conflict.
And because they're required to disclose conflicts of interest, and that doesn't always mean that the study's
always mean
poor. Yeah. But often, especially there are like specific there are specific organizations that are well known for funding very specific types of research. And so the studies are set up in a very specific type of way that kind of guarantees that no matter what, there will be some data that they can sort of rely on maybe. But you look at it and it's like, well, this isn't statistically significant. This is not saying what they think that it's saying. So, yeah, I mean, you can also look at the way, especially for meta-analyses, you can look at what their selection criteria was for like study inclusion. If most of the studies are considered, you know, medium to high quality, or are they also including some low quality? Because typically they disclose that. Like, what was the statistical selection process? And then if there is a study that's designed around statistical significance, like, what's the p-value? Like, are they operating with like a really wide lane from a statistics standpoint? Because there's kind of like threshold statistical criteria by which you need to be looking at data. And if you widen that up, it can still look really convincing, but you're like, well, no, that's if you tighten this back down to where it needs to be, then none of this falls within a window that is significant, and therefore you can't draw conclusions on it.
Yeah. So I think beyond reading an actual study, especially looking at the conclusion, research reviews are really good sources.
Mm-hmm.
Peer-reviewed research articles or
Yeah.
studies, those are really good. And then just making sure if you don't want to read a research review and you want to listen to a podcast, just because someone has doctor beside their name or they sound really smart or they've written a book, which honestly is kind of a red flag.
I would say having a book is a pretty big red flag.
Just because they wrote a book doesn't
Yeah.
mean that they're trustworthy. In fact, it's usually the opposite. Sorry.
They often know what they're talking about, but they also are trying to sell a book.
Right.
Publishers, they want the angle. Publishers, they know that nuance doesn't sell, but hot takes do. And so often, like, it's common that doctors and scientists and researchers can get sort of pushed into a corner where they've written a really hooky book that takes a very specific angle. And that that way of doing things is at odds with nuance and context and saying it depends. So that's what I would kind of say. The peer review process does clean a lot of it up, but doesn't catch all of it. Okay, you want to go through the list?
Let's dive in.
Okay, the first one I thought would be really fun. So it's the nutrition/food research. We're going to talk about autophagy and self-selected calorie restriction, which is essentially saying we are going to debunk Dr. Rhonda Patrick and a lot of other biohackers that are out there that really put self-selected calorie restriction on a bit of a pedestal from a health tool standpoint. So this has been something that she has been a proponent of for years, which is you should eat slightly less, like you should be in a slight calorie deficit at all times, which I'm like, that is not possible because if you were, you would just slowly shrink. So she's kind of gone over the years more towards the let's do some prolonged fasting, which is I think where a lot of those calorie restriction people ended up, which intuitively makes a bit more sense because at least you don't have to be hungry every day. You can just be hungry for like 3 days at a time, a couple times a year.
Really hungry.
Have you ever been so hungry? Like you feel hunger and you're like, oh my God, I got to eat something, but you can't because you're doing something. Maybe you've misallocated your time. You're like hungry, you're like dizzy, you're like, I need to sleep. You go through all the phases of hunger and then you're like,
fine.
Somehow okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're no longer hungry anymore.
But look, like that's a 4-hour window.
Yeah.
Period of time. I can't imagine doing longer than that.
Okay, once you get past the first initial challenge period.
Yeah.
Then is the rest of it fine?
I don't think that I think you probably just become so down regulated. Your body's like, fine, you want to eat? Well, we're not doing anything. But the issue that I have with this is like on top of it not being super well supported from a science standpoint, which like, again, are there studies? Yeah, there for sure are studies that will show you benefits of prolonged fasting by very specific markers. Are there enough of them to be like, yeah, we should do 72-hour fast? No, definitely not. If it tickles your fancy, I guess. But there are so many people online, and you see this every once in a while, like every couple of years, there will be somebody like in the CrossFit space or in the hybrid athlete space or in the endurance space that are like, I did a 72-hour water fast and look at all these positive changes that occurred. But it always comes like after peak season. It's like after competition season, after they finish their last race of the season. And it's like, I slept better. My inflammation went down. I'm less puffy, my skin improved, like all of these things. And I'm like, but it sounded like you just took some days off.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're experiencing positive effects. You'd actually probably experience even more positive effects if you ate a little bit while taking some days off.
Right. That's anecdotal, but sometimes the study will focus on what the benefits are or what you tease out of the study. But there's a lot more negative impacts to what doing the protocol would cause.
Yeah, and even like from an inflammatory standpoint, like the claim is often I felt my inflammation go down, and I'm like, what you're describing is joint pain and stiffness because your actual inflammatory markers went up as they've measured this, like the actual blood markers for inflammation don't go down when you don't eat, because not eating is very stressful. So yeah, I hate that, because these people are not credentialed in any way to be making recommendations, which is what that is. Whether even if they're not saying like, I recommend that everyone do this, you're an influencer on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you do is a recommendation. That's the deal. And so, yeah, people jump all over it, and then it's like it becomes a thing that people have tried a couple times, and it just goes in the catalog of weird shit that never worked, but definitely probably impacted someone's relationship with their body.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, autophagy. That's a word that gets thrown around a lot in these spaces, because
Parties,
what?
barbecues.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm hearing this from every direction, every angle. People are yelling it from the rooftop. So please explain what it is.
Alex, what about autophagy? So it is it's a natural occurrence in the body. It's basically like a cellular recycling system. Clears out damaged components and helps maintain really intracellular metabolic health. And it's believed that calorie restriction and fasting are among the strongest like non-drug inducers of autophagy. So therefore, if we're saying that autophagy is really important for cell metabolic health and cell health, then calorie restriction and fasting represent interventions within the spaces of like aging, neurodegeneration, cancer, weight management. Therefore, calorie restriction and fasting are a very important tool for inducing autophagy and therefore being a healthier person.
Mm-hmm.
So
what's so weird is if this actually was the case,
yeah,
people would be doing it. It would be okay. I think that
okay.
if it were actually that powerful,
Yep.
it would be talked about at parties.
I know.
It would be talked about as like people talk about exercising at parties.
Yeah.
That's what it would be if it were actually really beneficial, just like exercise is.
Yeah.
But it's fringe science. It's talked about on super, super specific types of podcasts.
Yeah. And it's looked at from a scientific standpoint through a very specific lens, like through this like tumor suppression theory of aging, which is that if you do this and you put yourself into calorie restriction, you suppress all of these things, you induce autophagy, you get into all these cellular pathways that significantly increase lifespan. And that's what we're talking about here. Like this is like longevity science. And it's not to say like the metabolic markers and the cellular markers for aging are super important to understand scientifically. They matter, but just because they matter doesn't mean they should be like aggressively pursued to control, because we have been around for a really long time, as well as a lot of other mammals that exist on this earth. And I would say that let's call it what it is. Let's call it famine, because that's what that's what people who are not privileged experience when they don't have access to food. So let's call it famine. There are people all over the world that experience it that don't live longer than Westerners. There are other animals that experience it during rainy seasons and droughts. You may have seen them on National Geographic. They don't always do so good out there. The argument is that when self-selected and I guess controlled, extends the lifespan. Which is like when you say it like that, you're like, that's kind of crazy. So the way that this has been looked at is it's when looked at over time. So let's look at a population of people that do fasting over and over and over again for a prolonged period of time. And that's what this review article is looking at and summarizing. There are people who benefit from fasting. There are people whose health benefits from a lower calorie diet. There are people who have excess weight, who have chronic cardiometabolic disease related to excess weight. There are people who have insulin sensitivity problems, blood glucose trouble. So calorie restriction and fasting extends lifespan mostly by reducing excess mortality related to excess food consumption. That's the extent to which you can go there and say that. And that's been proven in longitudinal studies with humans. That's been proven in mice, where they basically give mice access to an limited amount of food, and then they calorie restrict. And so when you look at the calorie restriction and the benefits of it in fasting in mice, when you compare the health markers in the mice in the groups who just got to eat however much they wanted and overconsumed for a period of time, they improve. But when you do the same calorie restriction in mice that are not carrying excess weight and haven't been overconsuming food, there's no improvement. There's no change.
And that's the study.
There's been lots of studies.
Well, yeah, but
Yeah.
that's
when you look at when you look at the research that is including those control groups as it should be, that's what it says. And also so when you look at pharmacological inventions, so that's fasting, but you can also look at resveratrol, which is a common pharmaceutical aid. You look at rapamycin, NAD plus is becoming very popular. Metformin has been around for years. All of those things also slow aging via weight loss.
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to say it. Most longevity influencers who are doing these protocols and promoting them aren't the ones that are benefiting in this way from them, as in they're not, quote, overweight,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of ironic.
Yeah. And this, again, I struggle with this topic because I'm not here to say body weight is always directly correlated to health status, because it's not. But that is the correlation in this research. And they've done additional research on non-human primates. So looking at monkeys and, when you put them in control groups and you calorie restrict them, when you have one group who is following a quote unquote bad diet, or they're overfeeding, and you have one that is eating as they normally would, no change in lifespan. And the ones that are eating as they normally would, and who also experience, frankly, for monkeys and for non-human primates, the same famine that they would experience from time to time in the wild, you know?
Yeah.
So, and maybe that's part of weight management for them over time. I don't know. Their metabolisms are also kick-ass like ours. We have the ability to fluctuate back and forth, but when we also have the ability to choose to remain in a stable metabolic state and eat at isocaloric intake, that is the healthiest way to eat. And that has been proven over and over and over again. No matter what books Jason Fung is trying to sell you, or what bullshit Rhonda Patrick has to say on her podcast.
So what's the point of all of this? That's a big question, I know.
What do you mean?
What's the point of her taking this fringe science and just having these beliefs?
Because she believes it.
But she's a scientist. I know, I like that face.
I think there are some people who genuinely believe that the science will catch up to their beliefs. Peter Attia has said as much on his platforms.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm an expert, and even though science doesn't support this, I believe that the science will one day support this. But I mean, we've learned recently, Peter Attia is a piece of shit. right?
I wasn't
The
sure
dude-
if his name was going to come up on this
Well, when
podcast.
it's hard-
And I've been really holding back.
Yeah. It's hard to talk about biohackers and like bro science influencers without talking about Peter Attia.
I know.
And when I saw that he was in the Epstein files, I was like, of course he is. Of course he is. The dude is like the quintessential grifter and he's charismatic. Like, it makes sense that he is as successful as he is, but it does not make sense that a physician who dropped out of residency, who was not board certified and has never like worked in a clinic ever in his whole life, charges $150,000 a year to be someone's private concierge physician. It does make sense when you realize that one of his clients was Jeffrey Epstein.
Okay, here's why. Because it makes them money.
Well, yeah.
Because it's a secret. It's something that isn't what everyone says is going. It's easier. It's easier.
Yeah.
When someone is struggling with their health or they want to improve their health or they want to live to 120 or they have a lot of money.
Yeah.
And they don't want to go down the path of just like creating a calorie deficit because frankly, that's hard. They don't want to stop being out and about and drinking alcohol. Not that alcohol causes, whatever. They want the magic pill. And frankly, not eating for 3 days, as hard as awful that sounds, is easier than doing a calorie deficit for X number of months.
Or getting on a training program.
Yeah, being on a calorie deficit.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there who, if you gave them the option to do something that's really, really, really hard and uncomfortable for a couple days and then basically be able to resume normal living, they'd probably choose that.
Like, even this is where you bring in cold plunges. It's so hard, but you only have to do it for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know what the specified time is.
Mm-hmm. And it's like...
But there's so many other things that have an actual impact.
There are a lot more minutes in the day. Yeah, so it's always one of these things. Like, is occasional calorie restriction and fasting, is it likely to cause damage? No, probably not. Maybe. I mean, we could look at it through a different lens. We could look at it through, yeah. Well, let's just assume not, if done responsibly. Is it going to have the impact that people think that it will have if nothing else is managed? No. So it's like when I think about these things, and I think when people who are like-minded, like you, smart people, the smart ones, you think about the biggest, like, what string should I pull that is going to have the biggest impact? Not fasting. That's not the string. That's the string you pull after everything else is taken care of. If you happen to be bored and like kind of a masochist and are willing to give up some of your days, I guess. I don't know. If you get your jollies off by being really, really hungry on purpose, which is not something I would choose, sure, go for it.
Okay, here's the thing. If anyone out there wants to fast, the rule is you can't tell anyone.
Ooh, I like that. Because then...
no one knows that you're doing it.
Yeah.
And that's part of it, I think.
It is a bit of a... people really do identify with the health decisions that they make and the weird things that they choose to do. So I get that. I like that rule. You can do it.
What if we did a podcast, Alex and Meredith fast for 3 days?
It would be followed shortly by the podcast titled Alex and Meredith Are Getting a Divorce. It'd be a 2-part series.
Yeah, it would be.
The sequel, the fallout. This the name of this this article that I'm talking about is called Rodent Diet, AIDS, and the Fallacy of Caloric Restriction. It's by Alexander M. Wolf, if you want to look it up. It's open source. There's another one titled Does Calorie Restriction in Primates Increase Lifespan? Revisiting studies on macaques. Is that right? Macaques? Macaca mulata. That's the genus species name.
Okay.
Macaca mulata. And mouse lemurs. So that's the primate research that I was talking about, which is by Eric Leborg. You can look that one up too. It's also open source.
The amount that I would stand to lose in 3 days by not eating.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I guess this is kind of one of those things where it's like they cannot decouple the positive impacts of fasting from the positive impacts of weight loss in certain in not only in humans but in mice and in other primates. And because they can't be decoupled, they can be controlled for, and you can create a like a null result. It's kind of like, you can't really say, and you can kind of say that it isn't doing what you're hypothesizing that it is doing.
All right. What about this? You fast for 3 days. Some of the research coming out of fasting for weight loss / improved health markers, autophagy, whatever. Are you also controlling calorie intake post fasting?
Well,
because
yeah. Okay, go ahead.
If you were to follow people after a fast,
there's compulsory.
Your body is screaming at you.
Yeah.
And most people, think about getting sick. If you have some sort of stomach bug for 3 days, you can't eat. It's not that you just lose 5 pounds and then all of a sudden that 5 pounds is gone forever.
Right.
Like if your body weight drops from 155 to 150 in the 3 days that you were sick because you couldn't eat and you were throwing up, you don't just stay at that weight, partially because you have lost water. But let's say you've lost fat from not eating, creating a calorie deficit. No one just lives their life, maybe some people, but most people don't just live their life after that, listening to their hunger cues, ad libitum eating, and maintains that weight loss. And then doing that repeatedly to continue to lose weight loss, that's very, very unlikely to work because your body wants to remain in homeostasis. It doesn't like pushing the dial too far one way. What happens is your body's like, wait a sec, we're starving. We need to increase hunger cues here. And then you end up eating more to make up for the calorie deficit, the extreme calorie deficit you were in for those 3 days. So explain that to me.
I mean, it sounds like A, you're speaking from a little bit of experience with the feeling recently. And then also B, I can explain it to you, but this is also something that has such an abundant amount of research behind it that it's like, it seems silly that people just don't automatically think about this because, the Minnesota starvation study, hugely problematic, would never be repeated.
Yes.
Proves what happens when you extend calorie restriction in otherwise healthy individuals. And there is a severe increase in hunger. And it's not like as soon as you introduce food, it doesn't go away. There's a preoccupation with food. And it's the longer you go without food, the more severe that becomes. And so your body will tend to dually defend a set point that you've been at, whether you're, whatever your body weight is. The only time I've ever seen this, the only time I've ever seen someone retain loss like this, and I've also experienced this. It's so rare. If you have just increased your either daily activity or training volume significantly. So I'm talking about stepping into a seriously high or at least like moderately high endurance training program. Maybe going and getting a job where you're now walking 10,000 steps a day. If you've started that and at the very beginning you then get like a stomach bug or something and you do like go some days, the better part of a week, and then some, eating way less, you drop weight. And that weight is a combination of water, it's lean muscle mass, you're going to lose some of that body fat, sure. But if you do sort of resume that level of activity as soon as you can, you'll see some loss there, like you will retain some.
Right.
But that's not common. And it's also not a protocol that I would recommend because you can't game it anyways, right? You don't know when you're going to get a stomach virus.
Yeah.
What I can say is like, don't go buy pants around that time.
Right.
Did I do that? Yeah, I did.
Well, you bought a bunch of new pairs of pants right after you had started.
Oh, this was such a
Vyvanse.
I had started like prescription stimulants, which
for ADHD.
Yeah. So resting heart rate is up a little bit. I'm more active than normal. I'm like definitely working out a little bit more than normal. It was my first season of biking. I had also had a stomach bug, and then we went to Nashville and went to Imogen and Willie. That's that whole story. And we just like unloaded and bought a bunch of pants, and they're awesome. But that was definitely like kind of the smallest I've been in a while. And I'm not quite that small anymore. And I think my legs have gotten bigger from the biking and the squatting. And so those jeans are a bit of a struggle to fit. And then when I had my sinus, my paratonsillar abscess, I went a while without eating a lot because I couldn't. And I, like as the psycho I am, I was like, I'm putting the jeans on.
Okay.
And I did, and they fit. And I was like, of course they do. So that's going to mess with my head. Anyways, sometimes you outgrow your jeans sometimes, even if they're really nice, and that's fine. And sometimes like I can wear them again and sometimes I can't. And whatever. I'm not trying to like kill myself to be in those jeans, but I will wear them if they happen to fit me.
I feel like you could wear them. Well, you wear pants in the summer. And
Yeah.
because there's more activities in the summer, naturally some people lean out.
Yeah, they're like, I can get them on, like I can wear them. It's just how comfortable are they going to be? Like in the summertime, they're sit down pants. In the wintertime, they're stand up pants. That's the difference.
Yeah. So I guess what we're saying is there's rarely an intervention for anything, specifically weight loss, where you don't have to continue at least some aspect of that intervention to maintain the results.
Right. And then from an anti-aging standpoint, a longevity standpoint, autophagy is a shiny object, but there's not enough science to say it's worth chasing, especially with the tool of intentional calorie restriction when there is so much evidence to support eating at like a isocaloric set point from energy, mood, strength, maintenance, training output. There's nothing that says that intentionally restricting your calories will make you a healthier person. In fact, there's growing evidence that it will do the opposite.
It was a long time ago I saw a video about this, and the man on the video was eating only the apple peels of an apple because that's where most of the nutrients are.
I mean, it's also arguably where all the pesticides are. Isn't that
I'm sure
crazy?
he washed
like,
the apple, and I'm sure he's maybe growing his own.
do you sometimes I'm like, how do you not get so annoyed with your own privilege in life that you're choosing to peel an apple and eat the part that people would normally throw away?
Right.
And then tuck the middle. Hopefully he was making a pie or something. But if you're eating an apple peel, you're not making a pie. Like, what kind of psycho are you? The things that when you don't deal with enough difficulty in your life, the shit that you start to choose makes you look like an asshole.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay.
The next one we're going to talk about is a study. It's a strength training study, and it's titled "Without Fail: Muscular Adaptations in Single Set Resistance Training Performed with or Without Reps in Reserve." So this is basically a study to understand if training all the way to failure is superior in a single set training approach, or if you can get similar gains when leaving 2 reps in reserve. So the design, this is actually a pretty good study. 42 young resistance-trained men and women were randomly assigned to one of 2 parallel groups, a group that trained to failure on all exercise, this is called the fail group, or a sub-maximal effort group, 2 reps in reserve, that trained with 2 reps in reserve for the same exercises. Participants performed a single set of 9 exercises, targeting all muscle groups per session, twice weekly for 8 weeks. The researchers then assessed pre-post study changes in muscle thickness for the biceps brachii, triceps brachii, quadriceps femoris, along with measures of muscle strength, power, endurance, and ability to estimate reps in reserve in the bench press and the squat. So there's like an educational component here. I dig it. The important bit here, if you missed it, it's the study participants are people who have experience with resistance training. And I think that's really important because there's a super important variable when you start working with people who are new. And it's called, Alex, what is it called?
Newbie gains.
Newbie gains.
Okay, so I thought, obviously I know about newbie gains. I thought it's also about knowing what to failure means.
Yes.
Because beginners don't know.
Well, sometimes people who are experienced don't truly know either.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
But I think they would have a better concept.
Yeah. And so what I also think is really important here, I haven't talked about it, so I'm not going to quiz you yet. No, I won't quiz you. The movements they selected here were really good. And the reason why I think that is because all of the movements are conducive to working to actual failure. So you have a front lat pull down, seated cable row, machine shoulder press, machine chest press, cable triceps push down, supinated dumbbell bicep curl, Smith machine squat, plate loaded leg press, machine leg extension. So all of those, for the most part, are movements that are machine supported, which I don't necessarily think that's like how you get the best training, but it does sort of like come baked in with a feeling of like felt safety. Like you're not gonna, if you go to failure, you don't have to deal with the barbell that's sitting on your back. Right. Which is, I think, prohibitive for a lot of people, especially people who are newer to training, even though this is a resistance, like people with experience with resistance training. So, the results, what do you think the results are?
I really want to say that people who trained to failure had better strength gains, stronger muscles. But I think my gut is telling me that there was no significant difference in change.
That's a good guess. That's accurate.
Yeah.
So the results indicated that both groups, the fail group and the 2-rep in reserve group, elicited similar gains in most of the outcomes, not all of them. Several measures of hypertrophy, so the like muscle size, tended to favor the fail group, as well as I think the counter movement jump height also favored the fail group. But there wasn't clear statistically significant support for the null or alternative hypothesis. So it's like a very slight advantage to the fail group, but otherwise like
that's great news.
Yeah.
Because I personally don't like training to failure.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It is.
Mentally, it's hard to go there.
Yeah. So, all of the participants across all groups demonstrated greater accuracy in estimating reps in reserve for all of the lifts, but especially the bench press. So good job, team. It's almost like when you do something more, you start to learn it.
I would argue, though, that when you're talking about to failure or AMRAP, as many reps as possible, when someone writes that in my programming or when I'm following a program, to me, 2 reps in reserve is pretty darn close to failure.
Yeah.
If someone says work to 2 reps to reserve or to failure, I mean, it's 2 reps difference, but most training days, that is to failure for me. When I'm grinding out those last 2 reps and I'm not sure I'm going to make it, my brain's telling me to stop to a degree where I'm like, I'm at failure, even though I may not truly be there.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah, because, and this is important because I think, and also, I guess let's back up and talk about the training design because this is an important part of this. But yes, put a pin in that. The study design was specifically to assess the efficacy also of single set routines, where people are training one single set on a movement and then moving on, and then training one single set on another movement and then moving on. And so they're training a lot of different muscle groups in one session. And the reason why they wanted to look at that as a secondary byproduct and like assessment with this study, this is a super well designed study because they can say this, is that they can say that single set routines can be a really time efficient strategy for promoting muscular and strength adaptations, regardless, like whether you work to failure or not, if you're a resistance trained and you're coming in with some experience. So, and I guess some of these people were transitioning from much higher volume programs. So a higher volume program would be one that is multiple sets on a single movement. So like the way that I program strength training, and like most strength and conditioning coaches would, if given the option, you're looking at like 3 sets of back squat, or you have someone work to a heavy set, but you know that person's also doing sub-maximal sets around that max that they're going to work up to. And you're doing different body parts on different days. This study is not saying that single set routines produces the same types of results as periodized routines. That's not what they're saying. What it's saying is that you can still see progress with this type of training program, and you can train it in two different ways. That's what we're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So the 2 reps in reserve, I think, is a really important call out because of what you just said, which is usually when I program something like back squats, say 3 sets of 8 reps, I don't want anyone squatting 2 reps in reserve. That's too close to failure. You're going to do that and you're going to need to stop the session and go have a lie down. If you're doing 3 by 8 back squat, it really should be like an 8 out of 10, which for back squat, assuming if someone knew that they are 100% safe, nothing's going to snap in their body. If they drop the bar, nothing bad's going to happen. An 8 out of 10 on back squat for a set of 8, probably looking at like 4 reps and maybe even 5 if someone's, depending on how hard they're willing to work. Like you got a lot of room left, but the volume is what is creating adaptation there.
You're doing it multiple times.
Right. And I think because you're doing more volume, you get more hypertrophy from that type of training. And maybe that's why they saw kind of a slight advantage to the near failure set for hypertrophy, because those increases in reps over the course of 8 weeks start to add up. You're doing just a little bit more volume. And so you could kind of expect to see greater hypertrophy progress compared to just baseline strength. And hypertrophy, if you're wondering, like, what is that? It's just the way a muscle looks. So a person who's training hypertrophy and is getting, making better progress there is going to have a fuller looking set of muscles than someone who's just training strength.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 reps in reserve. There are, 2 reps in reserve is very, very close to failure.
Yeah, that's still really hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is
still very interesting.
Kind of an important.
So you could say that there's other research that suggests that, well, not only just strength training period is beneficial, but working close to failure.
Yeah.
And this study,
it would be interesting to see. It would be interesting to see how this data looked if they were to evaluate it like a 4 reps in reserve, kind of like make the gap a little bit bigger just to see. But I think we all know what that would look like.
Yeah.
And, so it's almost not worth testing. But I think you really start to look at the nuance in different training programs, because you're like, oh, that sounds really good, but I train compound lifts, I train free weights,
right.
And so that changes things. And you may not be able to work to 2 reps in reserve every single time. It may not be safe to do that. It's definitely would be questionably safe to do 9 different compound lifts with a barbell to 2 reps in reserve. Your nervous system would just become like a potato chip. You'd be so fried at the end of it. But, you get a different thing out of compound lifting and free weights. There's more involvement. Your like whole body system is more involved. You're not doing isolated movements. It's more complex. And so you get different adaptation from that. Mm-hmm. And so I'm sure there are studies, and I could have pulled them now that we're in this part of the conversation, but I didn't know we were going to talk about this, that compare the efficacy or the results or different types of results that you might get with isolation, like machine training, versus free weight, like a machine squat versus a barbell squat.
My question is, approximately what rep ranges were they working at, and how did they determine the weights that people were using? Was it based on
I think they had a run-in period.
Okay.
Yeah, where they established some baseline, and that's where like the pre and post testing comes in.
Imagine they were like, okay, you're going to do 10 pounds bicep curls, as many as you can, but stop 2 reps to failure. First off, that would be so hard to judge.
Yeah.
Because what if you get 40?
Yeah.
Instead of 42? That would have been quite the design to figure that all out.
Yeah. And so I do think they're operating in like a very specific rep range. I want to say it was like 8 to 12.
Yeah, that would make sense. Easier to judge in that case.
Yeah, it's right where you'd want something like this to be, because once you get way below that, you're just operating at an intensity that's too high to say. I mean, 2 reps in reserve on a 3 rep is huge, but 2 reps in reserve on a 24 rep is tiny. So you kind of want to be in that same ballpark, which does would limit the, you can't obviously extrapolate this information on either side of that rep range with any amount of confidence. But given that's where a lot of people operate, pretty useful still.
Mm-hmm.
Especially on single. Yeah, if I was doing a single set of a whole body routine, I would want to be in that 8 to 12. That's why I wouldn't want to do less than that. But I wouldn't want to do more than that either.
Imagine just walking into a Globo gym and going to every machine and doing to failure.
Yeah.
That would be quite the workout.
I'd need to take a month off, I think. I definitely have days where I do whole body, but it's not whole body like this. I do basically a little powerlifting.
Yeah.
If I need to get all my strength for the week in one day, I do squat, bench, deadlift. Little accessory, call it a day. That's a huge day.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah. You should do a powerlifting meet.
So then time. No. That would be, I'm not that weak. I think I go by what I used to be able to lift, which, it's not even that different, but I'm not built for it.
Yeah.
I'm just not built for it.
It's a really long day too. Most of them.
How about this? How about if you run a marathon, I will do a powerlifting competition.
I'd be more likely to run a marathon than you to do a powerlifting. You'd have to train for it.
Well, obviously.
Okay.
But that's the thing is, I don't want to do that because how much would it take away from my running to actually get strong again?
I feel like you would get hurt in that pursuit, and then
100%.
I would also get hurt in that pursuit.
My back would be in so much pain.
So I'll stick to the powerlifting, and you stick to the.
That's a good call.
Okay.
Okay. What's the last study? I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, the last study in this section is called "Changed My Mind." So this is research. The title of the research study is. This is really long, so hang in there. I'm going to read the whole thing. So
should I try holding my breath for it?
Yeah, do it. Ready?
Okay.
3, 2, 1. The Sweet Tooth Trial, a parallel randomized controlled trial investigating the effects of 6-month low, regular, or high dietary sweet taste exposure on sweet taste liking and various outcomes related to food intake and weight status. I won.
You did.
The background on this one. So it's the conventional wisdom, the old school way of believing. Public health organizations currently recommend lowering the consumption of sweet-tasting foods based on the assumption that lower exposure to sweet-tasting foods lowers preferences for sweet taste, decreasing sugar and energy intake, and aiding in obesity prevention. However, empirical data supporting this narrative are lacking. So there's also, not mentioned here, but important to mention, there are a number of people who support this kind of addictive model of specifically sugar intake, sugar and fat combined. I don't think that food addiction is real. I'll say that, but there are people out there that do make observations and correlations around the dopamine production when rats eat certain foods and when humans do the same. And they therefore hypothesize that because dopamine is a habit-forming neurochemical, that it would then aid in someone forming the habit of consuming sugary and high-fat foods. So the objective of the study was to assess the effects of basically different levels of sweet food sugar consumption over 6 months, which is a pretty long time for a nutrition study, especially one that's highly specific. So more impressive, the parallel groups that were randomized and then controlled consisted of 180 people. That's a big study. Mm-hmm. So that it gets an automatic,
big sample size.
Yeah. That's a huge strength to this study. So the randomization process was quite good. The dropout intake was low, and the experiment was double blind, which is also
I like double
extremely
blind.
impressive for this type of study. The measures of sweet taste liking and intensity of sweet perception showed a high degree of sensitivity, which is good. It makes it more accurate, more valid. Therefore, lending to the strength and confidence when assessing the variables in question. What the study showed was that in the current trial, altering exposure to sweet tasting foods did not change sweet taste liking, nor other outcomes. So the results don't support the public health advice and conventional wisdom to reduce exposure to sweet tasting foods independent of other relative factors such as energy density and food form. This is something that had a big asterisk for me because I think this is really important. This is a registered clinical trial, by the way. You can go look it up. But my theory, I was like reading through this and I was like developing the theory as I was going, and then they spoke to it. So I was so glad, is that the natural way that a lot of people live with sweet foods is with guilt and shame for consuming them. So I've always, as I was reading this, I was like, well, what if you just controlled calorie intake? You made sure that people were fed. And then what's the perception like then?
Right.
And
And
so
we always say this too.
Right.
If you eat 3 really well-rounded meals and you're eating enough, you'll crave those types of foods less.
Yeah.
It's biology.
Right. But that's like not the way that people live, because there's that thing.
Yeah.
There's that belief.
Yeah.
And so people eat a cupcake and then they're like, well, I have to not eat for the rest of the day. and then
Yeah.
they're like, the cupcake made me crave more cupcakes. And it's like, no.
No, like we're laughing, but honestly, this is so true.
Yeah.
This is what happens.
But it's funny, but it's also kind of like upsetting because it makes its way into common knowledge and these very strongly held beliefs where like people are like, nah, sugar is addictive. If you eat sugar, you're going to want to eat more sugar. I'm like, yeah, if you eat sugar and then eat nothing, you're going to want to eat more sugar, which is like the pattern. And so I was really glad to see. I don't know why I was doing that. I hope that doesn't offend anybody. I know I've like definitely offended people by doing shit like that on this podcast. So I'm sorry if I've offended
It's fine.
you.
It's fine. We can
Okay.
laugh at ourselves.
We can.
And
yes.
we're talking about science here, so there needs to be some balance between seriousness and humor, and that's why I'm here.
It's so dry. We don't have time for that. So I was glad they included that here because I think it's a really important part of doing an observational study on intake is when you're looking at something that's so specific, like a very specific type of food, something that people believe is so easily overconsumed, especially with that overconsumption being driven by an air quotes addiction. You have to control calorie intake. You have to do it. And they did it. They did it.
That's smart.
Do you want to know what else they found?
Yes.
They found that not only did consuming sweet things, you're a sweet thing, not only did that not result in additional cravings for sweet things, it actually lowered them.
This is what I like. Because although I've heard from the horse's mouth, my horse being my clients, that sometimes after a period of indulgence, for example, Christmas, they get back into their routines, there's fewer treats around, they feel like they need a week of good eating, in air quotes, before they stop craving sugar. But there's part of me that's like, again, is this the story that we've just been telling ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
Are we just confirming this? But also, we need to consider the fact that in day-to-day life, when we're making up these stories or experiencing these things, which they're valid to a degree, like because of the way humans are, is it possible that having sweets around has an impact? Like there's that too. And there's also other confounding variables like just the way our brains work. What if it's not so much about the sweet food, it's just that you didn't realize you actually liked cupcakes.
Yeah.
And someone brought you a cupcake and then you're just thinking about the cupcake because you liked it.
And you haven't had one in a long time. Maybe.
But that can happen with any food.
True.
Like the other day I had a pear and I was thinking, I really like pears. So now I want a pear all the time.
It's like I'm eating this muesli that's not sweetened, by the way, and it has these big hunks of toasted Brazil nut. I'm like, Ma, I crave the Brazil nuts. What a nasty food to crave.
That is nasty. But I was going to say something else. Oh, on the note of eating more helps you crave it less.
Yeah.
That's such a great way to approach, and it's hard, but I've heard this in a couple different areas, not necessarily the science world, but in just like the mindset that to reduce the guilt and the shame and the restrictive binge cycle. And it doesn't need to be restriction to the point of like severe restriction, but that mindset of, well, I can't have that because I had it yesterday, or I can never eat a cupcake again, or I can't eat today because I had a cupcake. Like you said, leading to also like a scarcity mindset. Well, I can never have cupcakes, so because they're in the office today, I'm going to eat as many as I can.
Yeah.
That's kind of that mindset. If you just allow yourself the permission, give yourself the permission to eat what you want. And again, I know people are probably screaming at me right now. You will probably want those foods way less.
Yeah.
But I believe, and I've never done this, it's really hard to convince someone to do it. There's a really initial hard part that's really scary of just making food available. And again, like I know that there's so much nuance here. There are people who have food noise and struggles, but sometimes working to get rid of that shame and that guilt and that scarcity mindset can help you live in a more, can I say, biologically aligned world.
Ooh, biologically aligned.
Do you know what I mean?
Like it's like you're like biologically aligned. You're like astrologically aligned.
Because there's so much noise and in society around food and morals and what we should and shouldn't eat and rules. But if we could strip that away, which again would be a monumental task for one individual, but let alone society.
Right.
Could it be like this?
I think so. Yeah, and it's controlling. It's trying to control for the psychological variables, and the way that looks is different for everybody. But I do think for a lot of people, it is permission, and it's like, you can eat whatever you want here. If you don't want it, don't eat it. And it's like, I haven't really struggled with food that often. I definitely, like, if I let myself get real hungry, I will make some M&Ms disappear. But I don't judge myself for that. But the other day we went to a dinner party at a friend's place, and there were like 2 different desserts, and I had one. I honestly didn't realize there was a second, which is fine. It was ice cream cake.
I did. As soon as I walk into any room, I can tell that there's an ice cream cake in the freezer.
Ice cream cake. There's an ice cream cake here. I can sense it.
It was a Blizzard one too. I've never had a Blizzard.
Yeah. But I had a great dinner. It was so good. The food. I had the baklava, and then I was like, I don't really feel like having ice cream cake, so I'm not gonna. It's like you said, super hard. But I do think that psychology is accessible if people are willing to kind of like work and figure out how to get there and in what order they need to get there. Because while food isn't addictive, there are definitely process addictions, and process addictions can involve eating. And like, while that's not a food addiction, it is something that pertains to food, and it's a way that people use food in their lives. And so there's a psychology to that. Yes. You can't just say like, give yourself permission, because that's not helpful,
right,
for people that struggle in that way. From a biological standpoint, I think making sure you're well fed helps remove the variable of normal biological processes that are going to run in the background always when you're hungry. So if you know whether or not you're experiencing real hunger or not, because you eat on a regular basis, and you're like, well, I ate lunch 90 minutes ago, and I'm like, cannot stop thinking about that goddamn ice cream cake. Like, it's probably not hunger, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you can't have it. It's an important thing. If you want it, you can have it. But that's not your body craving sugar, because that's just, you want the ice cream cake.
Yeah. If you use food as a coping mechanism, like I use screaming at someone as a coping mechanism, a protective coping mechanism. If someone's like, Alex, you can scream at anyone whenever you want. That is not going to
That's
help.
Not the move.
So I just want to say that.
Yeah.
If someone's like, you can have ice cream cake whenever you want, or your favorite food whenever you want, and you're using food as a coping mechanism, not because you're in a binge and restrict, which honestly probably go hand in hand with a lot of people, that's hard to tease out.
Right.
And that's not what I'm saying. This is extremely complicated.
Yeah. But this is the part of the podcast where I will apologize to anyone that I have ever sent the TED Talk video titled The Pleasure Trap.
Likewise.
By Douglas Isle. That guy's a phenomenal speaker. I would put TED Talks up there with books. It's someone who is condensing a whole lot of information into 20 minutes. And in order to do that, they have to leave a lot out. And they can't include caveats. They can't include nuance. They can't include the fact that they actually don't have the credentials to be speaking on the topic. And it's not to say that that's wrong. Like,
well, okay, quickly summarize the pleasure trap.
The pleasure trap.
Because it is very interesting and super believable as a theory.
And I will also say he has a book titled The Pleasure Trap too. So this is all making sense now. I haven't read the book, but the summary is this. Basically, when he starts by talking about this research that's in rats. And when they train rats to push a button, and when they push a button, they get like a sugary thing, food. They are allowed to overeat. And so they push the button, push the button, push the button. At the same time, they're measuring the response in the brain, and they're measuring the brain regions that are lighting up. And the brain regions that are activated are the ones that are associated with dopamine. And so what you know about dopamine, they see the same type of behavior when they give rats cocaine, which is a mighty, like, it's like we're going to go there. Mm-hmm. But 2018 me was like, yes, cocaine. Let's draw that parallel. So they're basically saying that there is an addictive property to certain types of food, and that because of the reinforcement of dopamine, that it's like a pleasure trap. You can't stop, and you become habituated to that level, to that type of flavor and a level of enjoyment with eating. And so that even if you acclimate yourself to a highly palatable, ultra processed diet, even consuming what maybe other people might describe as normally flavorful food would feel very boring. It's not going to produce the level of dopamine that you might expect. And therefore, that person is going to continue to seek out ultra-processed, highly palatable food that's easy to overconsume, leading to...
So, if someone is eating fast food or things like chips, super salty or super sweet foods,
yeah,
and then they eat a dinner that is spaghetti and meatballs,
yeah,
that person who's habituated to eating highly palatable foods, their brain is not going to light up the same way to the spaghetti as somebody who eats spaghetti.
Right.
Or plain potatoes.
Correct. Yeah. So the intervention is to basically cut off all highly palatable food and eat not only normal food, but very plain food for a period of time so that your brain recalibrates to like a normal amount of flavor. So I'm sorry. I'm really sorry about that.
But no, this is what I was saying when people think I just need to stop eating. I need to go cold turkey for a period of time, and then I won't want those foods anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it does open up the door to some questions. Like if this research is correct, which I think it is, and there's been another review that has basically said, like, drawn the same conclusions. If this research is correct, but we also know that dopamine production is easily modeled in rodents and can be measured in humans, and we know that eating does stimulate dopamine, the question then becomes, what drives overeating, if not some level of habituation to flavor? I'm not trying to answer that question. It's probably a very complicated answer. But the good thing is the the research that's coming out, and like Douglas Lyle's stuff, that's not necessarily supported by research. That's a theory based on some rodent models, but it's not like, oh, this question has been asked by science a number of times and we've come to this conclusion. He's making connections, which
is his theory.
Right. So, which is not uncommon by people like him, but it certainly isn't conclusive. And it's an enticing theory, because if that were true, it does offer a very easy intervention. I mean, easy, air quotes, that would not be fun. But if that were the case, people would be doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not. So, which doesn't mean that it might not work for some people. This is the confusing thing about science, is like someone could go through that and absolutely experience what he's describing, but you're like, okay, can you, is that because of the mechanism, or is that because the person believes it?
That's exactly what I was going to say. If you tell someone, if I have a client, which I wouldn't do, but if I were like, okay, what I need you to do is for 1 week, only eat potatoes, boiled potatoes, then it will be so much easier for you to avoid all of those highly palatable foods that aren't aligned with your goals or health goals, whatever. People may come out of that potato week believing wholeheartedly that they no longer want those foods, which, guess what, matters.
Yeah, what you believe absolutely matters, especially if you deliver it like this. We are going to reset your palate. We are going to do a flavor detox. Here's my 7-day palate reset flavor detox protocol. Guaranteed to lower your sugar and donut cravings for good.
If we ever did something like that,
just
our business is in trouble.
Cancel me. Just cancel me immediately.
That actually sounds so good.
Wasn't it good? Like some people would buy that.
I would do it.
This is the secret no one's telling you about.
And you have so much clout too.
I know.
You say things with so much confidence. Like really.
Mm-hmm.
That's what this environment we live in. That's scary.
If I was like, hey, so this is what they're not telling you while they're trying to sell you GLP-1s. They're trying to convince you to fast, do ketogenic. None of that's going to work because you haven't reset your palate. You haven't detoxed your flavor preference. Look, in the Western world, we get so habituated to things tasting really good, to food that's like choice. That's not how our ancestors grew up. But I'm going to help you. Here's how you do it.
I bet you too, it would be very much validated in real time.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you come off, and the potato thing is just an example. You come off a week of eating boiled potatoes, guess what? Anything is going to taste amazing.
Yeah.
I remember when I did my elimination diet, I was having dreams about quinoa. Because that's one of the things you can't have. Mm-hmm. Never in my life have I enjoyed quinoa. Would never choose it. And all of a sudden, I'm dreaming about being able to eat it the next day.
Am I going to make white quinoa or am I going to make the red quinoa? And maybe I'll make both and I'll mix them together.
But then you're validated.
Oh, yeah.
All of a sudden, quinoa, for example, is this thing that you want. You're so excited to eat it because that's what your nutrition coach or your dietitian is telling you get to eat after the potato diet.
Quinoa.
And you're going to eat it and it's going to taste good because it's different.
And then imagine the nutrition coach or, internet celebrity.
Right.
Like,
book writer.
You're not going to believe this fucking thing I just came up with and told this person to do. And then it works. And you're like, oh my God, it worked. Other people are doing it and it's working for them. You get validated. And so then you can kind of like in your head, you're like, well, the ends justify the means when I don't think that they do. This is how the grift happens. This is how Rhonda Patrick's like.
It's not an actual theory that works. It's brainwashing.
Yeah. And it's like something's working, but it's not that. It's not that. You're just tricking people into doing something by not being honest because you don't even fucking know.
But then when is it that, you almost become confused in it?
Oh, 100%.
The creator doesn't even know anymore.
You get so
She's
wrapped
brainwashed herself
in your own lie. Look, whole different podcast.
Yeah.
This is a whole different podcast. We'll do it later. We'll do it at a later date.
I really like that research roundup.
I do too. thanks for doing it with me.
I
Maybe
was.
we'll,
I have to admit, I was in a really bad mood when we started.
I know.
But I'm really happy now. So
I had to restart the whole beginning of the podcast because you were very grumpy. You were
But
like,
look at me now.
don't like surprises. You can't just ask me a question on our very own podcast. You can't just put me on the spot like that with an audience who won't listen to this for another week.
Okay, well, what I'm saying is I'm really happy now. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Oops.
Ooh, how's your hand?
It's okay.
Okay, great. Yeah. Alrighty. Well, we'll catch you on the next episode.